Good evening, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Open Mic Discussions. I hope to provide you all with some very useful information that you may not have known about many of the events that have occurred over the past few years that are very important to you right now. So if you find this information useful, please like, subscribe, and share. And most importantly, also, if you have information that you think is relevant, please share in the comments below with me and everyone else, because it is so important at these moments in time that we're all constantly sharing information to inform each other and to be educated on these various subjects. So without further ado, I'm going to be touching on some various subjects. Do masks work? This is an important question to ask now at this point in time and kind of go back to some new things that we've seen. And I'd like to give you my perspective, but I always think it's very important to ask questions, encourage you to do your own research, and then at the end, I'll give my opinion as well. So I want to show you all something. First of all, I'm going to share my screen here. 1 second of a story that you might not have known about during COVID. Okay, let's go. So did you know about this? During the height of COVID, the New York Times had reported that 900,000 children had been hospitalized with COVID in the US. They later redacted this story. And do you know what the number was when they redacted the story? If you can see here, I'll scroll down a little bit. The New York Times issued a correction on Friday after a reporter said 900,000 children have been hospitalized in the US with COVID-19, when the true figure is a tiny fraction of that, only 63,000. This was between the years of August 2020 to October 2021. So they stated that there were 900,000 kids with COVID in the US in the hospitals. And later on, they redacted the story to where it was actually only around 63,000. The problem with this is called hit and run media, right? So they put out the story, they get a lot of attention, they pump out a lot of fear, and people click on these, and then other news articles also share these same stories. And the problem is, once this story actually gets redacted, nobody sees the redaction. So the damage is already done. Now, this has happened time and time again with numerous stories, which I'll be sharing in the future as well. So the next question I have of another story for you is, do cloth masks work? Now, at one point in time, if you'll remember, many people were saying this entire time that cloth masks do not work. But if you remember correctly, they referred to these people as conspiracy theorists. Yet I'm going to show you a story here. You can go to townhall.com and you can find this, okay? CNN masks are our cloth masks are little more than facial decorations. CNN medical analyst. Don't wear a cloth mask. Cloth masks are little more than facial decorations. There's no place for them in light of Omicron. Now, this is something I'm going to come back to later, but I wanted you to see this personally because this is from CNN. A lot of people really buy into what CNN shows them. And unfortunately, I would hope by now that people would realize that you can't trust any of the mainstream media, CNN, Fox News, any of these guys. And there's a lot more to that I'll go into later. So the next story I'm going to show with you is how powerful teachers unions influence CDC on school reopenings, email shows. Now think about this, and you can kind of read through here. This is from the New York Post, by the way. There's been numerous articles just like this where it shows these teachers unions influenced both mask wearing and lockdowns for the schools. Now, this is interesting because this is not backed by science. These are just teachers unions pushing what they want the CDC to do. So do you think that's right? I'd like to get your opinion. The last article I'm going to show for tonight is this one here. Let me see if I can get to it here. Hold on 1 second. Okay, so lockdowns, right? This is also something I want to discuss a little bit later. But John Hopkins study says ill-founded COVID lockdowns did more harm than good. And this article is from Health News Florida. You can find it there. And there's, I'm sure you can find many other links on this. Stop killing small businesses. I agree. I have agreed the whole time. That's something I'd like to discuss with y'all as well. So I'm going to go ahead and go back and stop sharing this screen so we can discuss all these items. Now, many of these items I think are so important to share because people just don't know. You're busy throughout the day, you're working, you've got family and kids to take care of, and you're just wanting to believe what the media is showing you, whether it be CNN, Fox News, or any of these media. Well, one thing you might not know is that at one point in time, the government gave, I want to say, and you can verify this, I always suggest you verify the things I share with you, that the government gave news media outlets, all of them, CNN, Fox News, $1 billion to push all the information they want to push for the injections, masks, all this stuff, right? So with the masks, I want you to consider this, you know, with the articles I shared, you have a CNN medical supposed expert. If you haven't seen videos on her prior, she's very, very flip-floppy to say the least with things. And now she's saying that facial masks are like decorations for your face, or the cloth masks are like decorations for your face, right? But at one point in time, this was called conspiracy theory. And if you think about it, people have had their children in schools this entire time with these masks on their face. Now, I want to share a story with you of how or why I stopped wearing masks. Okay, so let me take a sip of my coffee real quick. This is decaf, by the way. So listen, I'm like a language enthusiast, right? And so one of the languages I speak fairly well is Chinese. So I've got a lot of friends in China in many different locations, right? And before COVID came to the US, my friends in China were telling me it was happening there in China. They were sending me video of what was happening in China. And they also sent me a video of how stores, you know, like the shelves are being cleared out, like we've seen here of food. And that's actually what panicked me more than anything. I told my wife at the time, I said, oh shit, look at this. I think this is coming here to America. Let's go ahead and stock up. So we bought canned goods, we bought toilet paper, coincidentally enough. And so in that respect, we were good. Now, when COVID first came to the US, I want to let you know that for me personally, for the first, I'd say 2 months, I was scared. I was just as frightened as anybody. And I thought it was a great idea to wear a mask, to be careful. At the beginning, the 2 weeks to slow the spread sound like maybe a good idea. So that's kind of like where I started out. However, without looking at any data, without having to look at any of the science, as they say, what changed my perspective on wearing a mask was that I started noticing inconsistencies. And these inconsistencies were that I started noticing the same politicians that were forcing the harshest lockdowns on people in our society and the masks and all this nonsense. A lot of them, like Gavin Newsom, were being caught out. Nancy Pelosi, were all being caught out without masks, living life, going to restaurants. Many other politicians being caught, not just here in the US, but in other countries. My friends from other countries were sharing videos of politicians having parties. I think it's Boris, I forgot his name in the UK. It's like a big scandal where he's out partying it up with a bunch of other politicians, you know. And then I started to see a lot of videos with news reporters and politicians before they go on to TV or onto the video where they think the cameras are on. They weren't wearing masks, but when they think the camera's on, they put a mask on, right? Even with AOC, there's a big video of her outside. I can't remember, it's in front of some building where she's with like, I don't know, between 20 to 50 people. They're all laughing, joking and stuff. And then as soon as they go to take a picture, they all put a mask on. So these are the inconsistencies I'm talking about. Now, these were the inconsistencies at the time that told me, I don't buy this bullshit anymore. I think that something's not right about this. And then these inconsistencies became more profound, where I started to see, as you probably did, were actors and actresses, the same people that were shaming people for not wearing a mask, were at the Emmys, none of them wearing a mask, happy go lucky. And then they had the Super Bowl more recently, where many of the same politicians and celebrities that shame people, forced the harshest lockdowns, were all caught on video with no mask, having a fantastic time. Meanwhile, they force people's kids to be in school with masks on, the entire day for, this whole time of this pandemic. So to me, not only is this inconsistent with the message of saying that this is so dangerous, but to me, this is also criminal, because they absolutely destroyed people's mindsets and their livelihoods as well, because they put people in such a panic, but then they're doing the exact opposite of what they're telling us is for our safety. Now, in regards to the lockdowns that we had, and according to the John Hopkins study, was saying that they were useless, basically, right? And that they did more damage than good. There were actually articles when the pandemic first kicked off that I had read where they stated the same thing, but they were ignored, right? They said that lockdowns were going to be extremely detrimental and could have the opposite effect. They talked about having supply chain disruptions. They talked about, loss of businesses, loss of homes, but all this was ignored. And at the time, I was on Facebook. I got off. I'm not on Facebook anymore, but I was engaging with our mayor, with many different politicians on different platforms. And I was saying, now, wait a minute. I said, you guys are all for these lockdowns and shutting down everybody's businesses, but what are you sacrificing as a politician? They're not sacrificing a paycheck, are they? They're not going hungry. But I said, meanwhile, Americans by the millions are losing their entire livelihood. They're losing their houses. They're losing their businesses. I was seeing stories where entire families were losing their places to live with their kids. They're being kicked out on the street. They couldn't feed their families, right? And meanwhile, the politicians are pushing this. They're not wearing masks. They're not abiding by any of their guidelines, and they hadn't even lost a paycheck. So to me, this was quite criminal that you could push this on the American people, and then come to find out, you see a lot of these corporations picking up, houses and making a lot of profit, people losing their entire livelihoods. And at the same time, all these corporations, the top corporations, were making billions, but all the small businesses that we say we care about as Americans completely went under. And what I don't understand is how, as Americans, not Republican, not Democrat, not any of that political nonsense, how we went along with this, and how we allowed our fellow Americans to be completely have their livelihoods destroyed, because we were put in a state of fear. As you see now, many things coming out. And I hope if you haven't seen by now, these are just some of the articles where there's been redactions. There's many more. This is just some of the articles and video coming out where you have these same experts supposedly backtracking, saying cloth masks don't work now, which was once called a conspiracy theory. Here's something else you might not have known. Do you recall when they were saying natural immunity was a conspiracy theory? And now it's obvious, and they've come out and said, no, that natural immunity is real. It's a real thing. Well, here's something you might not know. At one point in time during the pandemic, you'll have to either Google or DuckDuckGo this, but the World Health Organization changed the definition of natural immunity. So what was the original definition and what did they change it to? The original definition of natural immunity stated this, is that you can acquire herd immunity or herd immunity, I'm sorry, either through natural infection or through a vaccine. That's what the original definition of herd immunity stated. Now, after that, they changed the definition of herd immunity to state that it can only be acquired through vaccination, not mentioning natural immunity. So now you fast forward, think about this now. I want you to stop and think. Think about how long they were saying that natural immunity was a conspiracy theory. Now, huh? Yes, no. So this entire time they were telling you this, and now you see that there was a change in the definition as well, and you have to ask why this was. Because we are being told this entire time that we're being given the science, that these people are the experts, but on every single thing, they have backtracked, and we found out that we've been lied to. Now, many people may have a short memory. However, for quite some time, we were being told that the unvaccinated people were the only people that could spread this virus, right? And it turned out to be a complete lie, that even the vaccinated people could spread this virus and they could get infected. So there has been so many different stories that we've been told. And I want you to consider this, all the inconsistencies, everything that Americans have lost. And politicians have lost nothing. Not only have they lost nothing, they gave themselves, I think it was a 20% raise. All the corporations that they're in bed with have made billions, while Americans have suffered. So I want to ask you, how important is it to you to stick to your political ideology? You know, so many people bought into all this, and I would think that, for example, with the mask wearing, right? I want to ask you a question. How many people do you think were wearing masks based out of their politics, or because they were conditioned also to wear a mask based on what they thought other people might think of them, right? So we have to consider these questions and be honest with each other. I feel like as Americans, we have been intentionally divided and we have everything stripped of us. So I'm hoping that by sharing all this information with you, that you will also share this information, that you'll find it useful. I, always think it's important to present and share information. Most importantly, ask questions, do your research. So many people buy into what the news has to give them, right? Whether it be Fox News or CNN, but then you find out that all of these agencies are being paid by people with invested interest, right? And so what I mean by is something I mentioned earlier is how the government gave these news agencies $1 billion, so give or take, to push all this information that has been pushed on you, right? And not just that, I want you to consider the people involved as well that have been paying these agencies. So Bill Gates had also paid around $350 million, I believe, to all these news agencies. Why would someone do this? Especially him, that's been pushing these vaccines this entire time. And if you think about it, think about your conversations you probably had with people. What I heard a lot is people saying to other people, or even to me, well, you're not a doctor. So basically saying you have no right to speak on this. But then at the same time, you have Bill Gates, who's not a doctor, on every single platform speaking, pushing this vaccine. pushing all these ideas that he's profiting greatly from by the same news agencies that he's paid millions of dollars to speak on. So at every turn, it's like we are being fed information from people that are being bought off by people that have invested interest. Even on the social media platforms, whether it be Twitter, Facebook, TikTok, right? You have where the government has also paid these people off as well. At one point in time during the pandemic, there were these articles, you can look this up, where it said that the White House hires an army of influencers to help with pushing the vaccines. And now they're doing the same thing as well with current stories, and that's a story for another day, but they're constantly hiring these news agencies, these social media influencers, because they know that these news agencies and these social media influencers have gained your trust, have gained your children's trust, and by using them, they can convince you to do what they want you to do. So, I've shared a lot of information here. I hope that, our society is starting to wake up. For quite some time, I was asking my wife the same question, and had the question in my mind the entire time throughout this whole pandemic is, how can people not see? How can you not see what's happening? So I hope that maybe as Americans, we're starting to see what's happening. We start to share this information, and there's some accountability that takes place because, Americans have lost everything. Americans have lost their businesses, their homes, family and friends, because they've been turned against each other, right? So thank you so much for tuning into my channel. I hope you have a great night. Please leave a comment below. What are your thoughts? If you have information you'd like to share as well, please share that in the comments below. Please like, subscribe, and share, and have a great day or night wherever you're at. Take care.